for this meeting has begun.
So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in the context of the European Master in Official Statistics. In short, EMOS, which is a joint project of universities and data producers to provide postgraduate education in official statistics at the European level. My name is Heli Lehtimäki, and I work in Eurostat in Luxembourg, where this session is hosted. Today's webinar dealing with how to reduce and manage the burden builds on the session we had 2 weeks ago. It is again delivered by Mojca Bavdac from the Faculty of Economics in the University of Ljubljana, Slovenia. Mojca is assistant professor and a coordinator of official statistics modules at the university's interdisciplinary graduate program of statistics. She's also a member of the EMOS board. This time we have expert guests from the Statistics Netherlands. I welcome Deirdre Giesen and Anita Vasen-Otten. We have currently some 40 participants, and let me explain a little bit how we run the session today. Now, only lecture as participants you can watch and listen to the session. Do not switch your webcam on. However, you can chat and use signs to interact with the speakers. You can find the signs on the upper part of your screen, for instance, to agree or disagree to what you see and hear. Let us test this. Please choose the agree option from the signs if you followed the first webinar 2 weeks ago. And let's see if we start getting any green signs on the participant list. One has raised hand. I see that there are lots of green signs coming up. And there are others who disagreed because they probably didn't follow the first session. Okay, very good. That seems to be working well. And I see that the chat is already working. We have a rather filled chat board on the right-hand corner of the screen. But let us test this as well. Right on the chat board, if you intend to follow the next EMOS webinar on the 29th of March on the title Innovation in Official Statistics and Multi-Source Statistical Production. This session will be given by one of our Eurostat directors for methodology, Emanuele Baldacci. And let's see if something happens on the chat room. Lots of reactions there. Thank you very much. At the end of this session, you can download the presentations, and I will send you the link to the recording later. Now, and I think it's time for Mojca to start. Enjoy the session. Voila, I think Mojca took control over the screen. And voila, off you go. I will switch off my webcam, and we put Mojca on. Here you go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Heli. A warm welcome to all participants. In today's webinar, we'll first return to the response burden concept. We will review it and add a holistic view of the whole concept. We'll then discuss actions that are commonly used at National Statistical Institutes, in short NSIs, to reduce the response burden. And at this point, I'd like to remind you of the exercise file that Heli sent you yesterday afternoon. I hope you have a printout ready. Next, we'll have a look at the generic statistical business process model, GSBPM in short, to understand which parts of statistics production deal with response burden And finally, we'll speak about challenges and obstacles that NSIs face in burden management. And I'm very delighted to have an expert guest with us also today. Deirdre Giesen from Statistics Netherlands will present their activities at Statistics Netherlands. Just a short explanation about how we are going to use the chat window. If you have a question about what I'm saying, please don't hesitate to write it immediately in the chat window. And there seems to be a problem hearing me, or is it okay? And we'll collect questions. We'll collect questions at the break for, let's say, final discussion. Now, if you give me just a second. Okay. Problem? Okay, it works. So let me start. Let me start by reviewing some points from the first webinar as an introduction to the newcomers and a refresher to those that were with us the last time. It's of vital importance to official statistics to have access to business data, because business data serve as input for key economic indicators. And typically, NSIs set up surveys to collect data directly from businesses. But responding to surveys occupies business resources and thus presents a burden for businesses. And we said already the other time that the burden may be interpreted in two ways. That's why we distinguish between two burden concepts. One is the actual response burden, and it is defined as the time needed for a response. Or this time can also be translated into cost of responding. And the second concept is about perceived response burden, which is defined as the feeling related to response, about mental effort invested in responding, and time spent on the survey task. So this one focuses more on the subjective experience during the response process. And when we speak about response burden, our focus is on respondents, because their decisions about how they are going to react to the survey request determine in the end the quality of collected data. Still, what happens in the business is just one part of data collection. The whole process of data collection and how response burden emerges in this broader process can be studied using the total business survey burden model. This model is also very useful for identifying opportunities for reducing response burden, which is today's topic. So let's have a look at the model. It all starts with information needs and demands of stakeholders for new data collection, for new data. And survey organization and stakeholders then discuss, negotiate, and finally agree on survey requirements. So how they will fulfill these information needs. Survey requirements are then incorporated in survey design. When designing a survey, we have to decide how to select the sample. we have to, let's say, answer the questions like from which frame we will draw the sample, on what date, using what kind of sampling, how many units do we need, which type of units will we take, and so on. When designing the questionnaire, we have to choose the mode of data collection, we have to draft questions, test and revise them. We have to organize them in sections, spread across windows or across pages, depending if we have a web survey or a mail survey, add instructions, help, build in some checks perhaps. And we also have to decide how we will contact the business, how we will persuade them to cooperate, and how we will manage data collection and ensure confidentiality. Now, the survey is then distributed to businesses. Each business decides internally how they will respond. For instance, who will act as a respondent? What data will be used? What is in the records? And what priority the task will get. Now, this internal business setting, this internal business context on the one hand, and respondent characteristics on the other hand, determine how the respondent will feel about the task here. And these feelings are supposed to be influenced by actual response burden. And this is an addition to the model that Gustav Haraldsen, our guest from the first webinar, suggested in one of our exchanges on response burden. Now, what happens in this box is out of our sight. We only see the outcome. So the correct answer, for correct answer we get a green traffic light, for an incorrect answer we get a yellow traffic light, and then for no answer we get a red traffic light. Now the response outcome flows back to the survey organization where it is checked, edited, and either accepted or discussed with the respondent by recontact. So before we produce statistics and distribute it to stakeholders. Now, let's review the model once more while thinking about opportunities for response burden reduction. So if we are here, for instance, what questions can we pose? Is the request for new data legitimate to start with? Then what data are absolutely necessary? Is asking businesses the only way of getting those data? Or are there any alternatives? What is the minimum sample size that we can afford? Is the questionnaire easily understood? Are the questions easily answered? Are there records in the business to support this answering? Are respondents supported during their response process? And so on. And now let's have a look at a list of actions that are commonly used to reduce response burden. And now you'll need that printout of exercise file that Heli sent you. On this list, you have a table, well, you have a list of 17 burden reduction actions alphabetically ordered. And we will, as an exercise, try to assign each action on this list to one type of burden reduction action. And I'm using here the typology that actually Deirdre proposed in one of our projects. So for each action, try to think Does it address the data collection design? So it's how the whole survey or research is designed? Or is it more about improving your data collection instrument, so the questionnaire? Or is it about improving the communication, the relationship with the business? And I'll now stop for approximately 5 minutes so that you can go through the list and complete the first column. You have there design, instrument, and communication as suggested possibilities. So just try to add a label for each action, which is the prevalent type. Okay, please go. So for each action that you have on this list, let's say account manager, try to think, does it affect design? Does it affect the instrument? Or does it affect the communication? So if you were wondering, this is the list. Okay. Just go quickly. Don't spend too much time. Just your first reaction. In case you are already done, you can check that there should be 6 actions in the first type, 5 of the second, and 6 of the third. Okay, I hope that you at least had a quick look through the list. And I will now ask you, we'll first try to focus on all actions that address survey design. Okay? And I'll ask for your cooperation. So please write in the chat window the number of the actions that you think addresses survey design. Just give, and we'll discuss all these actions separately, individually. Just give me some suggestions what you think addresses the survey design. One by one. Okay, now we have a complete answer. Okay, let's just start with this and let me have this here for you. Okay, number 6. Number 6, it's fewer items. So, and I agree, fewer items or fewer questions. So you reduce the number of requested items in survey requests. You ask for less data, maybe because they are less relevant, or you can estimate it otherwise. So I agree, number 6 is a good choice. Then we have number 9 in these, in several answers. Number 9 is about reducing the frequency of data collection. Yes? So if estimates are good enough for periods in between, maybe you can, you can do a quarterly data collection instead of a monthly one. Okay, we have there several suggestions for number 14, and this is also very good. It's about smaller samples. So if you can afford a reduction in precision of statistics or use some estimation methods, it's very good if you can do with a smaller sample. And then we have also, suggested number 13 in several answers, and this is sample coordination. So samples are coordinated and or rotated with survey holidays. And maybe this one requires a bit of explanation. So what, especially for students that might not be familiar with this expression, what is or what was maybe a typical situation in a National Statistical Institute? You would have one survey, for instance, let's take a survey on retail trade, and you define the population for this survey and draw a sample. And then you have another survey, let's say a survey on investment, and you define the population for that survey and draw a sample. Now this second sample is actually independent of the first one. So if the population is the same, or if it's overlapping, like in this case of retail and investment, the same unit may end up in both samples. Now, this is expected for businesses with a big impact on final statistics. Those typically larger businesses will be included in most samples. But it's increasingly seen as unacceptable for smaller businesses. Now, the main idea of sample coordination is that if you include a business in one sample, then you should not include it in a sample for another survey. Or, if we look at these survey holidays, if a unit already responded once, they should be left out of the sample for the next time. And this is the survey holiday. Very simple, explained in a very simple way. So this was number 13. What candidates are there? Yes, 12 also figures in some answers. And we could also say that registered data and register information replaces part of the data collection from businesses, and this is a design thing, okay? Well, you could say it's about the instrument as well, but it actually abolishes, it might abolish the instrument or affect the instrument, but I would prefer to put it under the design. So because it's about the data source that you decide, you may find the same idea, the same idea is also labeled as using administrative data, or in short, admin data. So register or admin data are, let's say, we can use it as synonyms here. And as an example, probably the most typical example is using data collected by tax authorities. For instance, you take VAT, value-added tax data, and you substitute sales data from surveys with information from VAT, from the amount sold. But be aware that although registered data are an important burden reduction action, that the concepts often don't match completely. And so let's say selling an asset is part of VAT declaration, but is not part of sales in business accounting. So it's not completely the same. Okay, let's move on. What else? Well, I have actually only one more item on my list, and that it might be that you included it in somewhere else, but I will mention it here anyway. It's fewer recontacts. It's number 7. Because in the sense that this is already thought of at the beginning of the survey, so it's part of the design of the data collection and the whole processes related to it. So you reduce the number of free contacts with businesses, and you know that you recontact the business when the traffic light in the model that we saw before is not green. So to get an answer or to get explanation or a correction of the data. And you typically don't have the time to contact all businesses with suspicious data. So you have to prioritize. For instance, you would first choose those with large impact on final results, and for instance, selective editing may help you here, or some other approaches are possible. And with this, I will actually conclude this first group, although I see that some of you also included number 11, so questionnaire testing as part of the survey design, but I would say that this is more part of the questionnaire design, which comes in the second type. So let's now move to the second group, second type of burden reduction actions, and this is actions that are more focused on the questionnaire, on the instrument. Which actions do you think are more focused on the instrument? I'll just okay, so we already have one answer from ONS. Okay, maybe I can start commenting. Yes, everybody is suggesting number 3, and let's see what we have under number 3. We have electronic versions of self-completion questionnaires, and that is correct. So the best way is that we have it in addition to the paper, but sometimes it is only a replacement to paper. But we have to know that there are some groups of the business population that might strongly prefer the paper to the web form. Okay, so this was number 3. Then number 4 is also suggested, yes. So instead of filling it in a form, you would use your spreadsheet where you collect data anyway and send the spreadsheet directly to the National Statistical Institute. Okay, what we have then? We have there, yeah, I see several 10, number 10 here, not suggested but by everybody, but some of you suggested. Number 10, which is pre-printing. So data of previous reporting periods are pre-printed in the questionnaires, or when you have data from another source and you want the respondent to only check the data and give the data only in case this one that you have are wrong or have changed. And then the already mentioned number 11, questionnaire testing. So questionnaires have been tested with respondents to assess how well they understand the questionnaire and are able to provide the data. So this is actually quite essential to ease a respondent's task. And nowadays it is also closely connected with usability testing of web service. And yeah, well, multiple users in Spain, I think, and in Italy, UK also added here number 17, which is it tries to work the same way as number 4 with Excel, but Excel is non-automatic and this one is automatic. Now, I don't know if you are aware of this abbreviation, and I'm not sure if it helps if I tell you that XBRL is Extensible Business Reporting Language. Well, to say it in a more plain English, this is an open standard for automatic exchange of data, of financial data in this case. So the idea is that you set up the system once at the beginning of the data collection, and you link each survey question with the items in the business information system. And the beauty of it is that there is no work afterwards. Every period, the data are automatically transferred, reported to the SI. Of course, until we have some revision of the concepts, questions. And you, besides XBRL, you have other options, SBR, and I think Deirdre will say a few words about this as well. And this is actually the ideal future as we can see it now. And I think that with that, I crossed all my items. We went through 5 items, 5 actions on this list, and now the rest we can proclaim as communication efforts. And the first, number 1, is the account manager. And so the contacts with large businesses are managed by a single account manager that these large businesses can turn to. So just to remind you that the largest businesses are drawn into many samples with certainty because of their impact on final statistics. And it's important that their data across surveys are consistent and that their usually complex reality is translated into survey answers in the right way. Plus that there are many practical things that account manager may know the business well enough to find the best response. Now, the second action, concrete use, says that information is provided on the concrete use of the statistical output based on the survey request. So what is the resulting statistics used for? Then number 5, respondents can receive personalized statistical feedback. So the data for their business are compared with relevant totals or averages or other parameters on the population. Number 8, help desk. Respondents can contact the help desk if they have questions about the survey. For instance, they can contact a specific phone number or send messages to an email address. So this is an important way of listening to respondents, to their problems, to their complaints. And then we also have number 16, the website help. Respondents can find, let's say, more general help website. And number 15, the survey calendar. When you include all survey requests in a survey calendar to give to businesses an overview of which surveys they can expect from the NSIs so that they can plan their work better. Okay, and I think we now went through all the actions, and I have 2 more questions about them. And the first is, which of these actions do you think have to be performed for the entire survey organization to make sense, to be fully exploited, so that are really used at their best? Any suggestions? So which actions should be introduced organization-wide, so covering all or at least most surveys? One and 15 for sure. Very good. Yes, we can start with that. So number 1, account manager is really useful only if this person has an overview of all surveys. And number 15, it makes sense to prepare a survey calendar only if you put on this calendar all surveys. So it would be a bit strange that you first send to a business a list of surveys that this business will participate in, and then you send an extra request for data. It doesn't work. Is there well, as a system, yes, but it can be directed to only to some surveys, especially because at least at this moment in time, business information systems are not so harmonized to be able to get all these data so easily. Yes, so another suggestion is number 16. Okay, number 16, website help. So ideally, I would say, of course, you can only put prepare website help for Intrastat. This is the biggest survey, and this means you cover all of the half of the burden already. But in general, if you start with one survey, it's good to have them all. So I would say this is ideal. Number 13, yes, number 13, it's sample coordination. So you can really relieve small businesses from burden only if you take into account all surveys that the small businesses can participate in. So definitely number 13, entire organization. And we had another, okay, number 8. Okay, this can be organized centrally, but probably it can also target specific surveys. So you can set up help at the survey level, or it can have certain advantages if, let's say, all complaints are handled in a single place. And maybe when you introduce electronic questionnaires, electronic reporting, it might also be useful that you do it organization-wide. Although it's possible, of course, to only direct this action to specific surveys as well. And now one more question. Which of these 3 types of burden reduction actions mainly abolish data collection, and this way reduce actual response burden the most? Is it design, instrument, or communication burden reduction actions? Okay, as a group. So is it design, is it instrument, or communication? I need a word now. Yes, it's design. Yeah. Actually, all actions in this design group directly reduce actual response burden, except for sample coordination. The purpose of sample coordination is not necessarily, well, it's not the reduction of the burden at the national level, but just distribution of the burden. Okay. Now, let's move on. And let's repeat very quickly what the European Statistics Code of Practice said about the burden. Principle 9, about non-excessive burden on respondents. The code provides several specific indicators, principles for burden reduction. And specific indicators address each of the 3 groups of reasons for monitoring response burden that we saw the last time. So as statistical reporting is part of administrative burden and is seen as unproductive, range and detail is limited to absolutely, so range and detail of statistics should be limited to what is absolutely necessary. So you collect the data because we cannot do without it. Administrative sources should be used whenever possible to avoid duplicating requests. And both data sharing within statistical authorities and linking of data sources are promoted to use existing data as much as possible. Now, as too much burden may lead to problematic response behavior, to reduce burden, information sought in surveys should readily be available from business accounts as much, again, as this is possible. And electronic data collection should facilitate reporting. And as businesses are an important stakeholder for NSIs, reporting should also be spread as widely as possible. Now, to better understand which parts of an NSI deal with response burdens, we'll have a quick look at the generic statistical business process model. It's a model that I think all EMOS students should be aware of. And this model describes processes needed to produce official statistics in general. So all work done at the NSI, let's say, gets an own box. But I will show first a simplified figure that is very clear that there are two kinds of processes at an NSI. As you can see here, these internal circles represent work processes, daily activities. So collecting data, processing data, analyzing them, and disseminating statistics. And these are undertaken quickly and frequently. And there are other processes which are undertaken less often, and these are the change processes. When you evaluate your work, you specify needs, you design data collection, and build solutions to run daily activities. So it's good to remember this distinction, as it's not really seen in the usual presentation of the model, which is this. And, well, maybe you can read it from the slide, otherwise you have it on the second page of your printout to read it more easily. If you have a closer look, you won't find burden in any of the boxes. It's mentioned as part of these overarching processes like quality that is present everywhere. But when you think about it, most boxes and processes actually relate to burden in some way. And some burden reduction actions only affect one box. For instance, if you think of sample coordination, it's done in 4.1. But there are other actions that involve several boxes and processes, and I would say that one of the toughest cases is, for instance, personalized statistical feedback. Because it involves the design of outputs, it involves building the dissemination component because it's, in a way, a dissemination thing. But it involves everything in the dissemination part, but as it also combines individual data, well, it is connected to number 4 and to number, so the process is in 4 about collecting and 5 about processing. And this combination of individual and aggregate data is actually not explicit here in this model because it's not something that is usually done and is this moment still more a rare thing. And we'll also see that for this reason, let's say, personalized statistical feedback is not so widely used. And to see that, we'll have a look at the survey, the Blue ETS survey again. The team led by Deirdre Geeson conducted a survey of 41 NSIs from 39 countries, mainly from Europe, but also Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States. And I'll show you the results for burden reduction practice. Now, if we try to have a look at what we have on the horizontal axis. So we have the number of NSIs that implemented a certain burden reduction action. So the more to the right, the more NSIs have it. While here on the vertical axis we have the prevalence of a burden reduction action. So how many MSIs implemented an action organization-wide, the most or all surveys. And we can say that some burden reduction actions have a natural limit. Well, you can do only to a certain extent with smaller samples or fewer items and or asking for data less frequently. Or even pre-printing, if you expect that the data will change from period to period, it makes no sense to pre-print that. Some other actions show technological challenges like XBRL, and still others suggest challenging implementation. For instance, dealing with fewer recontacts, introducing account managers, preparing personalized feedback, coordination, and calendar. But still, we have at least one group of burden reduction actions that looked quite promising already back in 2010. And I hope that the situation has improved since then. Now, to monitor and manage response burden, you need indicators. And these three, so the total actual burden at the national level, survey level, and the business level, are three basic indicators. But not all NSIs know the total actual burden for each business. And the reason is the same as mentioned with samples. Each survey is conducted or was conducted in the past independently. So it takes extra effort to build such a database. Now, but once we have such a database, we can start analyzing the spread of burden so that the burden is spread in a fair way, so more evenly across businesses, and maybe also paying attention to spreading the burden of a unit in time. So for instance, to leave the unit out for some time once it has participated, or to avoid inclusion in surveys, several surveys with the same deadline, and so on. A big question, of course, is what exactly you use for burden management. Will you use the number of surveys per business, or will you, surveys are not equal with regard to burden, will you use time spent per business, or will you take some relative indicator that takes into account available business resources? For instance, if you compare time spent on surveys in all available time of a business, and this time, of course, depends on the number of employees. And one more, perceived response burden is typically measured at the survey level, but there are at least two challenges that are best illustrated if we move to this slide. If we order business units from small to large, so we have small businesses here and large businesses there. Now smaller units, smaller units often use accounting firms for reporting. So the same person, let's say this person is in an accounting firm, same person completes questionnaires for several units. Now, whom will we attribute these perceptions that we would measure at the survey level? On the other side, if we look here at the example of large businesses, several people contribute to a single survey. Now, whose perception will we measure? Who will act as the main respondent? So these are all open issues to resolve. I here expose Three groups of important open issues about burden. First of all, what is really the impact of burden of data quality? We don't really have a good answer here, and especially lots of research so far was more qualitative than quantitative, so we would urge for more quantification. And there are many, let's say, smaller questions in this, under this big one. How exactly is actual and perceived response burden correlated? How precise measurement is needed for actual response burden? Because we know that collecting data about burden is a burden in itself. Can we use expert opinion? Can we use statistical modeling instead of collecting this data directly from businesses? And maybe study a bit more the perceived response burden of a survey versus the attitude to statistics. Second big group are causes and factors of response burden. We want to understand which are the most influencing factors, which are the main causes, because then it should pay off to work on those, focus more on those. And effects and efficiency of burden reduction actions are really rarely estimated, or at least rarely published. So more quantification and more empirical evidence is necessary to better guide action. Now, if you are interested in response burden, I just want to point to 3 events that are focused on business surveys. 2 of them are in a workshop format, so usually gathering about 50 people. One is International Business Data Collection Methods Workshop. The last one was organized in Washington a bit more than a year ago, and is expected not this year but next year. The biggest event on business surveys, or here called establishment surveys, is the International Conference on Establishment Surveys, or ICES in short, that happens in every 4 years. The last one was held in June last year in Geneva. And the other workshop is the European Establishment Statistics Workshop that gathers people along the statistical production on establishment for business statistics, and it will be held in Southampton this year, the end of summer, and you still have time to register if you are and submit your abstract if you want to participate. And with this, we came to the point where we will have a short break, let's say 5 minutes. And after the break, the words will go to Dirk Vergiessen, that will present the response burden management at Statistics Netherlands. But we will use this break also to collect any questions. So please, if you have any question for final discussion, you can write that into the chat window. But of course, also if more questions come to your mind during her presentation, you're welcome to submit them. Okay, now just a few minutes to deal with the technical.
My name is Deirdre Giesen. I'm a methodologist at Statistics Netherlands, and I'm here with Anita Vazen, and I'm a response burden coordinator at Statistics Netherlands. And we are really happy to have this opportunity here to share with you our experiences at Statistics Netherlands with managing response burden. And to start, I would just like to share a little anecdote with you from my early work when I started testing questionnaires with respondents to illustrate the importance of this topic of response burden management. One of my first business visits was to a family, a florist family who grew violets. And they had been in sample for our structural business survey, which is an annual survey that collects a lot of detailed financial information. And they had not responded in time, so we had reminded them. And then this gentleman had called us and complained about the questionnaire. And as I was just in the process of evaluating this questionnaire, we grabbed this opportunity and said, okay, good, can we visit you and talk in more detail what your problems are with the questionnaire? And when we arrived there, we found a whole family that was stressed out by our questionnaire because they simply did not have the financial knowledge to understand the questions. They didn't really understand their own financial bookkeepings. But to save money, they didn't want to pay their accountant extra to do this for them. So in the end, then we sent them reminders threatening with fines. And so they were really stressed about that. So in the end, the son had helped his father to complete this questionnaire. But when we went through the questions in detail, we found out that they had in fact made many errors in this process. And well, for me, I've always remembered this family, and I've seen several similar examples that show, well, response burden, although relatively it's a really small burden that we cause as an official statistical institute compared to all the other governmental burden that's out there. For those who are in our samples, it can be a real burden. And if we burden respondents too much, we end up with problems also for ourselves because we have to send them reminders and we have to clean the data a lot. So, well, just to show that is indeed an important issue, response burden, that we should invest in managing this and take it seriously. Okay, here is a nice figure, I think, that shows the response burden that is caused by Statistics Netherlands since 1994. It's an index with 1994 as a reference year, and this is burden measured in euros. And as you can see, actually since the 1990s, we have accomplished a lot in reducing the burden. And this was for a large part due to the fact that we could use registers more, mainly the tax register, and use new methodologies. And well, for now we seem to have reached a point where we cannot reduce much more with our current data needs and the current resources we have. But we do have hope for the future that there are some interesting developments. One of them is the use of this automatic electronic reporting systems, this XBRL or structural business reporting. That seems very hopeful to further reduce burden and also increase data quality actually. And of course we have the promising development of the use of big data to use as a substitute for primary data collection. So we hope that maybe in the next decade we can further reduce the burden with these new methodologies. Well, the response burden management at Statistics Netherlands is guided by international guidelines such as the European Statistics Code of Practice that Mojca just mentioned. And we also have to take into consideration, of course, our national policies regarding the management of administrative burden. And in the past, we mainly focused on managing the burden, the actual burden at the national level. But more recently, oh, what's happening here? I didn't click the right one. More recently, we also have started to look at the spread of the actual burden. So not only the totals, the national totals, but also the individual burden for businesses and how that is spread, and also at managing perceived burden. So how business respondents or business owners feel about the burden that we cause. And in the remainder of this presentation, well, Anita will talk about the bodies and roles that we have developed at Statistics Netherlands for managing the burden. And then I will talk about the procedures that we have And well, we have to see about the time how it goes. We can take some question and answers then, and if we have time left, we can also give you some examples of recent projects that we have. And this presentation is in fact based on a paper that we presented at the ISIS conference in Geneva last June. So if you're interested, you can also have a look at that paper later. We put it in references. And in fact, we were in a session about response burden management, also with presentations from other countries, and we also put their presentations or papers in the references. Okay, I'll give the floor to Annie.
I'll first start with the right part of this sheet, explaining all the bodies working on response burden reduction. I start with the bodies, the two bodies on the right side of this sheet. I start with the Respondent Advisory Board. It's a board that meets twice a year, and it consists of 4 chairs of trade organizations and 4 directors of companies. And from our office, the Director of Economic and Business Statistics and National Accounts, and the Deputy Director of Data Collection and myself participate in these meetings. This board advises us on all kinds of issues related to business survey respondents and keeps us very sensitive to the respondent view. They give us advice and they signal us for things perhaps we won't see when we are working in our daily process. The second body outside Statistics Netherlands is the meeting of intergovernmental burden coordinators, all kinds of colleagues of mine within our government. And in that meeting, we monthly share knowledge and experiences on reducing response burden. Some examples we can reuse within our statistical office, and some examples we can't. But then by sharing those knowledge, we have even more experience on best practices or things we better shouldn't do. To the left side of the sheet, you see the internal bodies. First, we have the program steering group on respondents. And in this steering group, I meet high-level managers of all departments within our office every 6 weeks. Response burden is something that involves many different parts of our organization. So all high-level managers from all the parts of the organization meet in this meeting, in this steering group. And then we interchange the experiences on projects and on topics related to reducing response burden. That's a very good session to share all kinds of experiences, and also to keep us alert to any progress in reducing the response burden. Next to these two groups, we have the Data Providers Contact Center. And since 2015, all respondent contacts of the Data Collection Division are centralized. So the help desk, the technical help desk, the handling of complaints are all taking place in one office. And this facilitates an early detection of any problems in the data collection in the field. At our centralized help desk, we also have the contact center agents who are able to quickly guide respondents to relevant information and to make sure that if respondents contact us for multiple surveys, they are treated in a similar way. We also have the questionnaire laboratory, part of the methodology department, where we pre-test and evaluate our data collection methods. Also, we are focusing on how to make sure that respondents' voice is included in development of projects. When discussing the roles, I start with the role of the response burden coordinator. That's my own position. Formerly, we had the focus on reducing response burden coordination has been done for several years, but it was never defined as a formal role within our office. From 2014, there's a formal position of response burden coordination, my position, and it has been established as a formal position. My role is to monitor the actual and the perceived response burden, and I'm within Statistics Netherlands wide the central point of contact for all response burden related aspects. I stimulate and try to facilitate the process of making us more respondent focused throughout all the phases of the statistical production process. And in keeping a line with all meanings of all kinds of advisors within and outside our office, I'm also the secretary of both the external Respondent Advisory Board and the internal program steering group on respondents. In fact, I try to link the outside views and our own progress on this issue. I try to facilitate the interchange of information, experiences, and best practices between the data collection department, statisticians, and methodologists, so that all new findings can also be incorporated in our production processes. Some other institutes have similar roles. For example, at Statistics Canada, they have an ombudsman for businesses who both works with complaint resolution and also on recommending strategies to reduce burden, and plays a role in committees that approves new survey proposals that may affect response burden. At Statistics New Zealand has a respondent advocate who has a similar role. In my opinion, it's crucial that there is a central person at a high enough level whose job is to look after response burden. Otherwise, the voice of the respondent may not be heard enough. For the 300 largest enterprise groups in the Netherlands, we have 5 account managers that are the single point of contact responsible for maintaining the relations with the enterprise groups. They profile the structures in the business register, they process the microdata, and eventually they are responsible for delivering consistent microdata to the statistical department. This approach is highly appreciated by the businesses, and it also provides us useful interaction and insights to improve the statistical production process. At our centralized help desk, we have the contact center agents who are able to quickly guide respondents to relevant information and make sure that if respondents contact us for multiple surveys, they all are treated in a similar way, as I mentioned before. And there are the data collection methodologists who are usually involved in any major project for data collection, revisions, and who make sure that we involve respondents' view in every of those processes. Okay, well, somebody just started to vacuum clean next door. I hope it doesn't burden too much in our presentation. I will proceed with the procedures. Well, first of all, what's very important is that we have an explicit data collection strategy. And this strategy that is rooted in our Statistics Netherlands Act, the law that allows us to do our work. And this act gives us the right to use registers, but it also gives us the obligation to do so. So we are not allowed to collect any data that is already there somewhere in registers. So that's very important. And
first registers, but we know that there still has to be some remaining data collection. And if we have to do data collection, we have to do so with minimal burden. This means that we try as much as possible to facilitate upload of files, for example, in our statistics of international trade in goods. And these automatic files that I may have possibility to talk a bit more later on. And if questionnaires remain necessary, we provide electronic questionnaires. Another important procedure is the sample coordination and survey holidays. Mortja already talked about that a little bit. We have currently a coordination for 13 different business surveys. And this allows coordination of the sampling and the assignment of survey holidays to allow a more equal distribution of burden over businesses and over time. And we have recently developed some new methodology, so we hope to be able to improve this even more. And lastly, we have a system of measuring the actual and perceived response burden. And what's very important that we have to report about the actual burden to our Ministry of Economic Affairs. It is one of the key performance indicators that we have to report about. So this is very important to make sure that we are always thinking about response burden when we make design decisions. So this is an overview of the governance system actually that we have developed at Statistics Netherlands to manage burden. And as burden is so interweaved with all aspects of the statistical process and different parts of the organization, we think it's really important to have a system set up like this. So here, I think, well, Mortja, you also decide, should we take some question and answers or talk a little bit more about recent projects?
Well, maybe we should first answer this question. What can social household surveys learn from business surveys with regard to burden management?
Oh, okay, thank you. I missed that one, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So what would you say? Because we were now so much focused on businesses, but of course, also asking individuals in their free time creates a burden. What can we say about that?
Yeah, it's of course a different situation in the Netherlands at least, because for the households participation is not mandatory, whereas it's often mandatory for the business survey. So we have a total different situation. And I would say that traditionally the household surveys, as participation is voluntary, have always been very much concerned about burden. Otherwise they don't get the response rates. Of course, now at Statistics Netherlands we have several initiatives to further improve our data collection for households. Mm-hmm. But I'm just thinking of what extent what we are doing for the businesses is also used for households.
Yeah, we have a group of colleagues from methodology, data collection, and from the statistical department discussing improvements on business statistics. We also have a similar group of on the social statistics, and especially the people from methodology and the people from data collection are constantly making sure that examples that work very good within the social part of the statistics can perhaps also be used at the business part, and vice versa.
And of course, for the households, there's also sample management. That
yes.
Households
yes.
are not
oversampled.
Yeah, I'm not exactly aware what the rules is, but if you are in a survey for 1 year, you will not be in another survey for another few years.
Okay, we have one more question here. Do you have a general frame, I guess? for managing and coordination of business surveys?
EDM also.
Well, as for the measurement of burden, there are national guidelines that we follow, and as for the frame, I guess what we presented is more or less the frame, I would say.
Maybe this was more, where you draw your samples from, I guess.
Okay.
So you have a single, at least I understand it this way, and Abigail, yes? So a single frame from where to draw?
Yes, that's the business register. And that's our general frame for all business statistics.
Okay. Well, if at the moment there are no more questions, maybe you should at least show a little bit, say a bit about SBR project. Maybe this one is the most interesting.
Yeah, actually, I must admit I don't know too much about it, but on the references, there's also a paper of colleagues of mine who do know a lot about it. So I think it's a really exciting and promising development, this standardized business reporting. So in the Netherlands, we have recently developed a standard for the digital exchange of, I should move to the next slide, of financial information, business information, and this classification system has been developed by a group, a close cooperation of various market parties as well, in cooperation with the Tax Office, the Chamber of Commerce, and Statistics Netherlands. And
may I just say, just to be sure that we understand what this classification system means, that actually this is kind of a chart of accounts, so a standard way of using the accounts in your bookkeeping.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So once a business has made the linkage between their own system and this standards, they can easily extract information for government reporting. And in fact, the Tax Office already uses a lot of this standardized business reporting. We have also made this possible, and it is actually starting to work nowadays.
Yeah, this classification system is a real bridge between their own administration and the things they have to report to the government.
Okay.
So,
But do you expect, for which surveys do you plan to use this standard? For all surveys or just for specific?
the financial one. So we're now getting messages for the short-term statistics, so turnover and specification of turnover.
And investment.
Investment and part of the structural business surveys.
Yeah, in the future.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
What about the next project, maybe?
Yeah, maybe there was an example of the, I don't see this correctly. I don't know if you also see this correctly. There, we had a recent redesign of our survey of international trading goods, and actually this is the most important survey in terms of response burden. Yeah, it causes half of our response burden. And interestingly, this is not the survey that annoys businesses the most. That's because it has become part of their routines. It's a small monthly task, but of course, if you count up a monthly task, you get a lot of burden. And but this survey has been redesigned so we can, for a large group of the businesses, can reduce the frequency of the data collection. And we had a large project to make sure that early on in the redesign process, also the respondents' point of view was included. And we also presented a paper on that on ISIS. I will just move quickly to this last slide to show you that we have put some references in there. And I think maybe we should stop here.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Deirdre. Thank you, Anita, for joining us today. As a wrap-up, I hope we convinced you that response burden is a hot topic for a reason. For instance, last June in Geneva, I don't think there was a session that the word burden would not be spoken at least once. And I also hope we made you aware of the numerous actions that are done for the sake of reducing response burden, either actual or perceived one. And the topic still has many unanswered issues, so I encourage you to contact me or my guest with your permission. If you have any questions, if you have any research ideas that you want to discuss, if you want to do some empirical investigation, we'll be very happy to hear about it. And thank you for attending, for actively participating, and thanks also to Eurostat and especially Heli for all support in the organization of these webinars. Yeah, it was really a great experience also for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you also from my side. I would put here you will see from the below here the presentations to be downloaded. So I will first of all thank, of course, my speakers, Moitza and Anita and Deirdre, for this interesting and very proactive presentation. And the webinars will continue after somewhat a little bit longer break in 4 weeks on the 29th of March with a presentation by Emanuele Baldacci, who is a director here in Eurostat for methodology, corporate statistical and IT services. And he will talk about innovation in official statistics and multi-source statistical production. I would leave you at this. Thank you very much, all the participants. And I look forward to meeting you this virtual space in 4 weeks' time, hopefully so. Thank you very much.